Can a heavier oil help with oil consumption? Well, today we're going to find out. Welcome everybody to another episode of Build and Drive, where today we're going to put this rumor to the test. Can a thicker oil help reduce oil consumption? So everybody, if you're familiar with this N52 B25 engine, it was burning oil at about 1 liter per 1,000 kilometers. We kind of beat on the engine, and that oil consumption increased all the way to 1 liter per 300 kilometers. Now, we went and rebuilt the engine, put new rings, new seals, head gasket, valve stem seals, all that jazz, and it's still burning oil. And we realized that that's because of a poor piston ring and piston oil return design. I didn't put in the updated piston, so that was my mistake. So if you're interested in checking out those videos, I'll link them down below. And if you want to follow along on the oil consumption behind the scenes on how it's going, I will be taking a long road trip. You can follow me on Instagram. So now BMW recommends a 5w30 or 5w40 oil for the N52 B25 engine. Now, we've been driving a 530 and we've been driving a 540 oil for a better part of 2 years. I alternate between 530 and 540 in the winter and summertime, and I have collected a ton of data on that, which we'll talk about in a second. So I'm going to go ahead and swap out this oil and explain to you guys a little bit about why people think the 5w50 oil should actually help reduce oil consumption due to its increased viscosity. So what do you guys think? Is this actually going to help reduce our oil consumption? I want to hear what you guys think down below in the comments. I think for the N52 it probably won't do much. However, if you're running a different engine like a Japanese car engine which has tighter tolerances, I can see how this could help. All right, well, I'm gonna clean up now, but I've measured 6.5 liters in here. We're good to go. I'm gonna be driving about 1,200 kilometers in just under 4 days. So I'm gonna bring some of this oil with me, the 5w50, put it in the trunk, and we're gonna see exactly how much mileage we can get. So while we're running our oil consumption test, let's quickly look at why use a 5w50 oil. People say a thicker oil will help reduce oil consumption. So let's actually break this down and take a look at this. So this Adenol 5w50 oil, not sponsored by the way, is a fuel saving oil, which is interesting. It's developed for maximum engine performance, blah, 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 blah. And it has A3B4 specification and meets BMW Long Life 98 specification, which is really good. So the 5W50, it starts here, can be used in both high and low temperature ranges. Its viscosity is stable over a wide variety of temperature ranges and therefore can be used all year around. It can be used up to minus 35 degrees Celsius and has a flow rate at 100 centigrade of 16.3 to 21.8. So this is important. We're going to talk about flowability in a little bit here. So in our N52s, we run a 5W30 or a 5W40, which is across these ranges. Remember, but the 5W50 can run across all of these ranges. Is that good? Is that what we want? I think with the lifters and the Vanos system, they have tiny oil passages that require a certain level of flowability, not too thick and not too thin, in order to operate effectively. So I don't know if the N52 is sensitive enough to run a 5W50 effectively over time, or it's just going to wear down components and not lubricate them properly. So if you're doing normal day-to-day driving, a 5W50 I don't think would actually, you wouldn't benefit from any extra protection because you're just driving down the highway and it doesn't really matter. Your car's sitting at 100 degrees and you have all this extra oil pressure for no reason. I would just run a 5W40. Now, so it says here, due to the good flowability of 5W50, they reliably lubricate all important points in the engine. Well, that is to be tested. I'm not sure. And that's why 5W50 oils are used, for example, in car racing. They do not break apart even under the highest loads. So this is what I would like to talk about now. When you are running your engine,
at, let's say 5w30, this is the chart, this is viscosity on the left here, this is temperature on the bottom. Your 30 weight oil, as it warms up, it becomes more dynamic, it becomes more liquid. And let's say that you're running your car at 530, you can see the 40 weight here is a bit more thicker, and the 50 weight here is even more thicker than that. Let's say you're running your car at 110 degrees. Let's put this, if I was to draw a little line out here, this actually is not as linear. It should drop off, you know, it should drop off more if we were to draw a little line here. Your 40 weight, let's say you're running a 5w40 at 110 degrees, it acts more like a 5w30, and that's there to protect the engine. Your N52 requires a 5w30 or 5w40. So if you're running a 5w40 and it's getting hotter, let's say 110, 120 degrees, it will act like a 530, thus protecting your engine. But if you're running a 530 weight, and you're getting to 110, 120 degrees, your engine oil is going to become more of a 520, which is not what you want. You'll have lower oil pressure, and you'll start eating bearings and start destroying, you know, camshafts and things like that. So that's why moving to a thicker oil, especially in higher temperatures, is useful. Now, is it beneficial to run a 550? Well, that remains the question. I know at the Hockenheim ring, I was running a 540 and my engine oil got to 109 degrees centigrade. And when I was at the Nürburgring, I actually got it up to 117 degrees centigrade. So definitely a thicker oil would have helped me there to protect the engine. So let's look at what happened with our oil consumption comparing the 530, 540, and 550 in the rebuild N52. Now, if you've been following along on this rebuild, we've been trying to get a proper oil consumption reading, and it's really harder than it looks. We first used a 530 oil to break in the engine, and we got about 1,000 kilometers to about 1150 kilometers per liter, and it started getting worse and worse and worse, going all the way down to 800 kilometers per liter, which isn't really an improvement over the previous engine. I thought I had done something wrong in the rebuild, and I was, considering sell the car. I made another video on the 20,000 kilometer update on the rebuild, so if you're interested in that, you can go watch us diagnose everything and dive into the engine. But at the end of the day, it was just a timing chain tension or leak. I had forgot a washer on there, and slowly it was leaking more and more and more over time. So we fixed that. We changed oil to a 5W40, and we immediately got 1,350 kilometers per liter, but that slowly got worse and worse and worse, all the way down to 900 kilometers per liter, and I knew there must have been another leak. So lo and behold, the new CCV lower hose that we had just installed the year before had gone bad and was leaking. So we fixed that, changed the oil back to a 530 for the winter months, and we got some good readings of about 1,350 kilometers per liter, which was the same as the 5W40. So I thought a thicker oil would help with oil consumption, but looks of it, this may be a myth for the N52 engines only. The N52, you have to understand, was designed to rev super high. It's designed to burn oil to trade off for performance. So maybe if you tried a thicker oil in a Japanese engine, a Honda engine, or Toyota engine, this may help, but the piston rings themselves are designed to allow for this oil burning process to help cool the engine and things like that. So the low tension piston rings somewhat support oil consumption so that the engine can rev higher. So let's see what happens when we add a 5W50 oil. Now, I was hoping for the best. Now, I don't recommend going to a thicker oil. You have to check your engine specifically. These engines have tiny oil passages in the lifters and the Vanos system, and if these get blocked or you have sludge in your engine and the oil pressure can't get in there, you're going to blow something up, especially if you live in cold climates or your engine is sludged. So I recommend using the manufacturer's specification for your engine. But for this experiment, we're going to throw in the 550 and see how it does on this N52. So how did the 5W50 oil do? I did about 3,000 kilometers, and we were burning oil at about 1,355 kilometers per liter. And for the third time in a row, it actually got worse and worse and worse. So I knew I had another oil leak somewhere. In my update video, which I linked below, we did a smoke test on the intake, and I actually found that the adhesive valves were leaking, but also the vano seals were leaking. I thought it was very minimal, but I changed them anyway for this experiment, and we added another liter of oil, and the car actually went 1,600 kilometers per liter, which isn't as good as I thought, but it's still better than before, better than, 1,100 or 1,200 or 1,300 liters per kilometer. So we're going to run the 5w30 and 5w40 again to see what oil consumption we actually get, but that's going to take me some time to do this. So please subscribe if you want to see that video, and hopefully when that video comes out, I'll link it down below. But so for now, put what car, your make and model you guys have, and what oil you're running down in the comments for comparison. I'd love to know what oil consumption you guys are getting, and if there's anything we can do to improve that. So the last thing I noticed running the 5w50 oil is actually my fuel economy became worse and worse and worse. I don't know if I have a fuel leak or something, but switching to the 5w50 actually made my fuel economy worse. With the 530, I was getting about 9 in the city and 7 on the highway. With the 550, I was getting like 10.5 in the city and 8.2 on the highway. I thought that was pretty crazy. I don't know why this is not the fuel saving oil that I thought it would be. So we're going to run this test again. And, I honestly don't think a thicker oil will actually help with oil consumption in the way that we want it. I would just run a 5w30 or 5w40 full synthetic and live with that, just to make sure that the engine is at the right flowability rate and you're protecting all the components and not wearing them out prematurely. Now, if you are running like a track car or something like that, that's different. Yes, run a thicker oil, especially as the temperatures get hotter. But in this case, if you're just doing daily driving, I think a normal oil is fine. So thank you guys so much for watching. If you have any questions, drop them down in the comments. I look forward to seeing what your feedback is and trying to figure out this oil consumption issue with these BMWs. But they're awesome cars. I'm going to keep driving mine, and hope you guys can keep all of your cars on the road too. See you guys in the next video.